If you've been on the internet recently, it's becoming increasingly harder to tell if you're interacting with a real person, a human, or an AI agent or bot. Well, the token we're going to be talking about today is trying to solve that problem. It's backed by Sam Altman, who created ChatGPT and OpenAI, and it recently caught a bid. And stick around towards the end because we're going to do a deep dive on the actual chart itself. But let's dive into WorldCoin and see if what they're building makes sense and if it's worth having in your bag. As always, we're going to start off with the narrative and vision. You can see their website here. A lot of great marketing slop. I'll talk about this orb thing that keeps showing up, but let's zoom out and talk about what they're actually building. It's a global proof of personhood layer, which is what they call World ID, on top of the L2, which is WorldChain, where humans get throughput priority, basically. Their bet is that AI floods the internet. Are you human becomes the default gate. If that's true, WorldCoin becomes the governance / ownership rail for that network. And if you ask me, that's already the case. Here's why it's different. They use custom hardware, which is the orb you're seeing here in the marketing slop, ZK protocols. This isn't yet another L2. It's an identity-first block space with a path to human-only user experience in a world of AI agents and AI bots taking over everything. There is a reality check, though. The compliance, privacy, regulatory space is still not giving this the full green light. There's an EU probe around this, and there's speculation that governments could crack down. We'll see if that ends up being the case or not. But I think the pros here are that it is a category defining use case, basically the humanity layer. They do have a hardware moat with this stupid orb. There are some early consumer tie-ins. They have a partnership with Razer, think mouse pads, gaming, mice, etc. The cons are the socio-political risk around this type of thing. It's very dystopian. It's very, Fahrenheit 451. There is opt-in friction as well. You need to get scanned for this to work. And adoption does depend on third-party integrations. Regardless, I think this is sort of towing the line between dystopian and maybe necessary in this world we're in where AI is kind of taking over pieces of everyone's life. And for that reason, I did give the narrative and vision a strong score, a 17 out of 20. And we can move on to the tokenomics and supply. We'll take a look at the coin market cap really quick. Now, this is zoomed out to all their price history, but you can see in the last 7 days, this has really caught a bid. They have a 10 billion supply of WorldCoin. There's up to 1.5% inflation by governance. The community gets 75%. Investors get about 13.5%. The team gets about 10%. And there's a reserve of give or take 2%. A lot of the insider allocations for this thing have 12-month glyphs and then 24-month linear. By now, a meaningful chunk of that has been unlocked. And you can see that here on the unlock schedule. There is still more to go, obviously, but a large portion of this has already been released. There is 2 billion WorldCoin circulating, which is about 20% of the total supply. So they have clear long tail issuance, which means that there's going to be structural seller demand unless growth is faster than emissions. The good news is that the emissions are governance tunable. The bad is that, basically retail folks, they hate math. They don't want to think about it. So the pros here are that there is a transparent schedule. There is a broad community allocation and governance controls the pace. The bad here is that there is a big cap. There's continuing emissions and that insider unlocks are still an overhang. Regardless, for the tokenomics and supply, I didn't really see any huge red flags here. So I gave it a 13 out of 20 and we can move on to the tech and execution. And this is their world tech tree, which shows their ecosystem and sort of the things that they're building. You can look at these detailed diagrams if you want on your own time. It really, there's a lot in here. This is talking about their actual orb that you saw in the marketing slop. So their stack is basically the World ID uses ZK to prove humanness without exposing biometrics. The Orb hardware is open sourced and has been through a trail of bits, privacy, and security review. All of those are good things. The World Chain, right? How does the actual crypto token integrate into this? Is that it has the priority block space for verified humans and gas allowances. There is an active GitHub for this, a really active GitHub compared to stuff that I've seen. So they are working on this continuously. And what it looks like, pretty ferociously. I just pulled this up and they've already had updates, within the last hour. Their consumer integration, the stuff I talked about with Razer and gaming SSO, is moving from PR to pilots. So they're executing on that. The overall theme here, I think for me, is that there is real research and development for this. There is hardware plus the ZK. There is a Superchain alignment, but the other side of that coin is that hardware is hard. The ZK UX is kind of fragile, and reliance on partners to prove real-world utility remains to be seen. With all that aside, though, I did give it a pretty good score of 16 out of 20. They have a clear vision of what they're building, and I think that sets them apart from a lot of the other sort of AI chains. You can see the Orb here and kind of what it looks like under the hood. So they're working on a lot, right? They're iterating on it. I had to give them a solid score of 16 out of 20 for tech and execution. And we can move on to the market structure and liquidity. This thing is super liquid. I mean, it is on pretty much every market you would want to have a coin on. Binance, it's on Coinbase. This is tradable at size. So if you're a whale selling or buying, it's not going to impact the market too hard. It has a almost $4 billion market cap with insane volume, at least recently. Again, with the price pump, that makes sense. And there is a flywheel structure to this, right? The more World ID integrations that happen, the more signups, the stronger the narrative, the better the listings and liquidity, easier to absorb the emissions overhang. And the Razer pilot kind of hints at that. So this has tier 1 liquidity. I had to give it a super strong score, 18 out of 20. And we'll talk about really quick the market, the exit risk and VC stakes, and then we'll get into the chart. So again, the allocations are 25% investors, team, reserve cliffs. There's 75% for the community. There's not an obvious doom chart in terms of unlocks. The biggest issue here for me was the regulatory and privacy issues, right? Germany recently paused scans during upgrades and review. There is EU scrutiny on this going on. So there is headline gap risk when that kind of stuff does happen. And for that reason, I didn't knock them too hard, but I gave them a score of 10 out of 20 for the exit risk and VC stakes. And we can move on to the chart finally. Let's take a look at it. So this was a weird chart, and I had to figure out how to even structure this because they released a long time ago in July 2023. It's important when you look at these coins yourself, if you pull up the Coinbase listing, it's only going to show you price data from this area. So you really need to go back all the way to the beginning. TradingView luckily has a ton of different ways to look at this. But regardless, when they released, they had this original pump, and it was a very clean Elliott 5-wave impulse, which you can see here. Wave 1, a retracement that stayed above the first move higher. Wave 3, which is historically supposed to be the strongest, a retest that did not go below the first wave, really basic 5-wave impulse. And then wave 5, which topped out at about $11. So super crazy in terms of gains. And then obviously you had the ABC correction. Again, this is a weekly chart, so this took a long time to unfold, but you had the ABC correction, and that sort of ended in 2024. And now we've been kind of just floating around between $1 and $4, mostly in the $1 to $2 range. And recently it has caught a bid. So if we actually zoom in to the recent price action, let's take a look at the daily. Actually, let's take a look at the 1 hour, because this might make more sense. So if you zoom in, the way that I'm looking at this and the way that I would be kind of structuring, say I wanted to get in and buy WorldCoin, how I would go about doing that, again, this is not financial advice, is I would do this. So this might be, let's say, impulse wave A, right? So the easiest thing for me to do is just draw a fib retracement. Let's say this is the end of the first leg. It might not be, but let's say it is. And you can even do a sort of fractal impulse wave here as well. So let's say that this is wave 1. Let's say that this is wave 3. That should be the strongest wave. And this is wave 5, right? And so now we might be doing a ABC corrective phase. Let's say it's down to here, retraces, and something like that. Again, this is all just forecasting. No one knows the future. But if I were sold, let's say I love their vision, I love the narrative, I love the orb, I'm an orb boy, and I want to get in on this. This is how I would be looking at it. I would be trying to get in at a price target of $1.40 to $1.60. You don't want to chase these pumps. Price usually is going to fill in any kind of inefficiencies, any kind of gaps. So if I get rid of my Elliott wave stuff, you can just see on the 1 hour chart, there's two very clear fair value gaps. There's one there and there's one there. So those could be your two downside targets. That's where you start to accumulate. And then you're hoping for a next push higher if they start actually shipping product, shipping hardware, whatever. Again, with the previous price action that we've had, it's kind of hard to really make a good prediction for where this is going to go. If you just brought up this chart like this and did no analysis, you would say that this chart, based on the price action, is completely cooked, because that is what it is. It looks completely cooked. However, if their narrative starts to gain steam again and they actually start launching products and integrations with real companies, this can flip around very fast, right? If you look at the monthly, this basically still just started in terms of price action. There's still potentially a lot to go, and it's going to be interesting to see how WorldCoin does. So I'm keeping it on my watch list. We'll see what happens with this. Do I like the actual narrative? It's okay. It's a little too dystopian for my tastes, but we might have to deal with that. We're living in a dystopian future, whether you like it or not. That just is the case with how fast AI is growing, and I don't think it's stopping anytime soon. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. If you did, you know what to do. I'm not even going to ask you for it. Thanks for sticking it out with me this long. I drop these 2 or 3 times a week. I hope this added even maybe just a little bit of alpha to your day. And as always, have a good one out there. I'll see you next time.